All right, so this one is somewhat one we've been planning for a while. The one that I always had in mind was Pineapple Express and Half Baked. But then we were talking about it last week, and we knew we were going to do Pineapple Express, and you made the argument of, well, you really wanted to talk about Grandma's Boy, and the thing was Half Baked. Maybe we can pair it with something like How High later. Even I'm not sure how you would really talk about either of those movies at great length, but your argument was that what other scenario are we going to be able to talk about Grandma's Boy?
Why would you not want to talk about Grandma's Boy?
Yeah. So this is where we ended up.
Mm-hmm.
But I figure we would start with Pineapple Express, even though it came out second,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of the bigger movie, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it was more, you saw a lot more for it when it came out. But you had like James Franco, you had Seth Rogen, you had those two to carry it.
Yeah, because Franco kind of eventually got swept up in that sort of stoner humor thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I remember correctly, when this came out, it felt like it came from out of nowhere that he was in this part.
Yeah.
So it was like, because I wasn't familiar with Freaks and Geeks yet when this came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, how is he involved in this? How did this happen? I didn't realize that he had known Rogan and Apatow for some time when this came around already. But it's, to my understanding, the way it went down was, unsurprisingly, it was supposed to be the roles were switched.
Uh-huh.
And then, like, on his way to, like, a reading or something, Franco said, the only problem with this is that I want to play Saul, the part that Rogan has.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, I want to say it was Apatow was in the room and said, dude, we were literally just saying that while you were on your way here. And so they had him read for Saul, and then it went from there.
Which was the right choice.
Yeah, because obviously, interestingly enough, despite the movies that people know him for, I almost feel like Rogan is better at playing the straight man.
Yeah.
And it's one of those cases where now that you've seen it this way, now that you've seen it this way, especially now that you've seen it this way for the last 12 years, it's harder and harder to imagine the roles switched.
Yeah.
Like I can see it, but it just would not have the effect that it does now.
No, and Seth Rogen, like you said, when he's in a lead role, he is the best as the straight guy. When he's not being straight, it's better in supporting roles like 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Yeah. And even then, when he is playing those supporting roles, I don't think he's had one quite as, I don't know if over the top is the right word, but to Saul's extent.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, while we're on the topic of people doing things at the time that were like, what the hell? The director of this stands out as well.
Mm-hmm.
With David Gordon Green, who up to this point, because he would go on to do like The Sitter and Your Highness,
Mm-hmm.
basically going to show that he can do comedy really well, but maybe it's more of a standalone thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many things wrong with The Sitter and Your Highness.
Mm.
But prior to this and after this, he was into like he's like known for his really depressing indie movies like George Washington, and the year before this he had done Snow Angels, which is one of the most depressing movies you'll ever see.
Mm-hmm.
He did a great movie called Undertow with Jamie Bell and Josh Lucas, and then after this he kind of went back to that as well as doing the new Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as this, when you take the fact that The Sitter and Your Highness just didn't work at all, this one just really stands out on his filmography.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can even see like the scenes where he and Saul are in the woods during that montage. That's exactly what a normal David Gordon Green movie looks like. Like I can't help but wonder if the scene where they're in the woods is David Gordon Green kind of doing his thing intentionally, or if he's like almost having fun with himself,
Yeah.
with his normal material. I can't tell, but either way, it's weird how it just kind of fits in there.
Yeah.
And George Washington was this like incredibly low budget movie where he basically just followed these kids around.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically David Gordon Green's like the Florida Project before the Florida Project was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, do you know who a cameraman on George Washington was?
No.
Danny McBride.
That makes sense.
It all comes together somehow.
Yeah, because didn't Danny McBride help write the new Halloween?
Yeah. and then of course his presence here, it goes without saying.
Yeah.
So do we just start at the beginning?
You have to, because there's a hell of a kickoff by Bill Hader.
I remember when we first saw this, I don't know if you remember it. Do you remember the context in which we saw this in the theater?
No.
I don't want to say too much, but I had a really shitty night. And it was what was going on this night influenced a falling out that you had with Owen that lasted for years.
Mm-hmm.
And to cheer me up because of what had happened that led to all of this, you took me to this movie. and it worked in all the right way. Because I really wanted to see this when it came out. and I was not disappointed at all. And that of course starts with I was in tears laughing before the Bill Hader scene was even over. Because I think I had only been really familiar with Hader because Superbad was the year before, which I thought he was hilarious, and I feel like that was the first time I ever saw him with Superbad.
Mm-hmm.
And then this, he has one scene, and this one scene plays to like all of his strengths in the span of like 2 minutes. And it's a glorious showcase for a glorious talent.
Is this the movie that you really started like really paying attention to and really liking Bill Hader?
Even just being one scene, I feel like that's very likely.
Because you enjoyed him in Superbad, and then you saw him in this, and you're like, okay, he can do this consistently. We're good.
Yeah, when he can imitate a full jazz band with his mouth, it's like there's something really special about this guy.
And you don't expect it, because the way it starts, it's black and white. James Remar is there as the very serious military guy, and then Bill Hader just starts riffing for 5 minutes.
It's James Remar is such a perfect balance to this scene. Just everything about this scene works.
I would love to know how many times they broke while watching Bill Hader do this.
Yeah, because Bill Hader can break pretty easily, but he can also just go and go and go without breaking too.
Yeah.
And the great thing about this is you go into a movie like this knowing that Franco's going to be the show.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is out of nowhere for Franco, it seems. Because obviously we mentioned he had those connections with Apatow and Rogen before. But still, he was mainly known for like Spider-Man when this came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe indie movies like Sunny, depending on who the crowd was.
And after this, he went back to being serious for a little bit, because we had 127 Hours, Milk, things like that. So this was out of left field.
Yeah, the only time he really did out-and-out comedies was either with Apatow's Crew or Date Night, and is that it?
Yeah. He's in he gives he does that scene in The Green Hornet with Waltz where he makes fun of his name.
Yeah, he's basically to the Green Hornet what Bill Hader is to this.
Yeah. Which it's funny, because we know how talented Franco is. I want to see a serious movie where him and Waltz share some screen time.
Yeah. And that's the thing is
Because those two in a scene together could put on an acting clinic.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is you go into this knowing it's going to be the Franco show. It's so unexpected that we get this glorious Bill Hader open.
Yeah.
And it's like the Bill Hader scene happens, and you're already on the floor in tears, and the movie hasn't even started yet.
No.
It's like that's when you know it's going to be good.
Yeah. All we're doing is setting up Seth Rogen's rant in his first scene and a location for later. That's all we're accomplishing here. But yet Bill Hader takes us on the most fun scenic route to get there.
And what the movie does so well and avoids is that this Hader scene is so good, it easily could have peaked early.
Yeah.
Like, it could have been a hilarious opening and then just shit the bed the rest of the way. But no, it's just getting started.
And we didn't spoil it with trailers.
Yeah. I feel like Bill Hader's big enough now that they would have today, but in 2008, they wouldn't have, like, felt a need to market him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then we get into the regular movie. And I do like this introduction to Rogen. And it's one of those cases where Rogen being a process server in different ways could have been its own movie.
Yeah.
It could have been a better version of Serving Second.
Yeah.
But once again, we're just starting. We introduce Amber Heard, and not to make jokes about anything serious, but it is kind of hard to not notice the first second we see Amber Heard, she is one part of a relationship, and she's just immediately aggressive.
Yeah.
As soon as we see her, it's almost foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll leave that at that, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But I like the way they play on that too with that relationship, because it goes and it feels like it's setting up a different cliche every time they have a scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and then we get that great payoff with their last scene together.
Because it starts off like it's gonna be, oh, she's the weirdly young girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like when we see her being aggressive, it's like, oh, she's going to be the girlfriend that's bad for him. He gets to have a big breakup scene with later that's good for his character.
Mm-hmm.
But then it shows that they're actually are really warm to each other. And it's like, oh, are they an actual couple? Is this going to be a thing? And then we get and it just keeps going back and forth. And I love that they played with that.
Yeah. And then we get I guess, the rom-com payoff, I'll call it. You think that's what's coming when he calls her, and then we just go in a totally different direction.
Yeah, because that pretty much sets up the whole joke of it going back and forth through the whole movie is summed up in that one phone call. We get the best of both worlds in that one phone call.
And in that relationship, normally a relationship like that would bring down your comedy movie. But then Pineapple Express is like, no, we have Ed Begley Jr. You're going to have fun here too.
Yeah, I love that the dinner scene goes so haywire but not for the reasons you think it will. Where it's like they're being chased by Kevin Corrigan and Craig Robinson, and they're literally trying to kill them. And the threat when he has dinner with her parents is the parents. Nora Dunn's got a fork that she sticks in Franco.
Ed Begley Jr.'s packing heat.
And it plays with those cliches through the whole movie. Even the downer scene when they break up their friendship, it's supposed to be the sad scene, and we get Franco sitting on the swing set crying into a sandwich. There was even a movie where I used that. I want to say it was Good Boys.
Mm-hmm.
has a scene like that, and the scene plays it up more or less pretty seriously. And I used the Franco sitting on the swing scene as an example of how to do that and stay a comedy.
Yeah. You've used this before to describe other movies. This movie just keeps hitting you with jokes. It's just an endless barrage of them.
And we keep bringing Franco into it. Let's talk about Franco's entrance into this movie.
Mm-hmm.
First off, I just love that very first shot of him eating while he's watching TV. Just that shot alone is like, yeah, this performance is going to be exactly what I hoped it was.
Yeah. Then he starts. What's the line he quotes from the TV?
I thought the hurricane season was over. Because that's the thing, is even though his character's so out there, he just says that line back to the TV. But then later, when he's walking into his kitchen, he just repeats it again for no reason. I've done that. That's the funniest part about that, is that's something that people just do for some reason. But for some reason,
I also love the contrast. I didn't pick up on this at first. I picked it up on this most recent time when I watched it. But I love the fact that he's watching this happen on a small screen, but he's got music playing out of his big TV. And he's watching this on such like a little tiny TV. It's like the TV our grandpa used to have in his room. That's what he's watching it on.
And you mean the TV we watched in living color on all the time?
Yeah.
And we haven't even mentioned that of all things, he's watching 227. and there's so many things. This is such a long scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I love about it, because so much, but so little happens in this scene.
Yeah.
Because we get Saul's introduction, we get the introduction to all of his weed, we get the introduction to Pineapple Express, we get all the descriptions of Pineapple Express. And wasn't like the first trailer for this movie just the scene when he's talking about this is the dopest dope I've ever smoked? Just that scene by itself, I think, was the first trailer, wasn't it?
That might have been the teaser. I'm not sure.
And then we get the cross joint. And then we get my personal favorite bit when that customer comes over.
Wait, we have to go back to the cross joint. I love how he takes the time to explain like how it was made, and he's like, "It's my second favorite architect after." And he just has all this random information, and he's so happy about it. He's just sitting there getting everything ready, spewing about these architects he loves.
And it's like you can tell he loves when Dale comes over because he's looking for an excuse to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, like you talk about how it's a long scene. It's a long scene because Saul won't let Dale leave.
Yeah, and the greatest part about that was what I was going into was when that other customer comes over that he hates.
Yeah,
He's like, "Don't let him see the cross joint because he'll never leave." And he builds that up like this is a guy that just hangs around. He's like, "I hate him. He's a lingerer. He lingers."
yeah.
And the great thing about that is the guy comes over, they do the exchange, and the guy leaves, and he's like disgusted. He's like, "Oh, he's such a lingerer." It's like the guy was barely there.
and you've got Rogan over there like, "Yeah, don't you hate it when people just linger?"
It's like I almost want another scene to explain to further elaborate why he hates this guy so much. But I kind of like that it stands alone.
I like that we don't get any more about it. We never hear from him again. We don't see him again. Like that's all we get, because that's all we need.
And then it's actually the pacing for this movie is actually amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Because this scene with Saul, the first scene goes right into him witnessing the murder. It's the very next scene.
And you were talking about how it stays a comedy even when he witnesses the murder, and you think, "Oh, this is a serious point that pilots the movie." Then he starts backing and running into each car over and over again, and it's like, nope, still a comedy.
My favorite part is that you can see it dawn on him in real time that he's about to witness a murder.
Yeah.
As Gary Cole's walking up behind him and pulls the gun out, he's going, dude. And then I also love the first time he sees Rosie Perez, and his response is, "Oh, what an adorable little cub." and I love even more that line is off screen. It's always great when some of the best lines are off screen. And then there's another brilliant joke that comes back because of this. You know where I'm going with this? The fact that Gary Cole comes outside, sees the roach, and says, "It's Pineapple Express." It's like the very next scene is Rogan coming to the conclusion that that's exactly what happened.
I think, if I remember right, Rogan even acts it out as it went down.
And it's exactly as it played out. And the great thing about that is usually that joke is the reverse, where it's like, he'll say, "Oh, what if this happens?" And then the punchline is it cuts to that happening. But the brilliant thing is that the movie does it this way, where Gary Cole does that, and then Rogan later says, "Oh, I'll bet this happened exactly as it did." And then the movie actually does reverse it later, when they're talking about, "Oh no, they could triangulate our signals. Let's break the phones and get rid of them." And then like 15 to 20 minutes later, Rosie Perez is like, "Yeah, we triangulated their signal." It's like they did that joke both ways, and I love that they did that. And then there's honestly more. There's even more Franco stuff I want to go into. Do you have more Franco stuff?
I mean, let's go to the woods and the scene where they're smashing the phones, and Franco just throws his. He's like, "I was trying to hit that tree."
That one.
And that's the phone they end up using because they never find it.
And then the whole thing, the thing that sells this the most is like every single line is like Franco does not half-ass any line he has in this movie.
No.
Like not a single one. All of them are delivered perfectly. We forgot to mention the fact that he got a Golden Globe nomination for this. Because there's the thing, I think he does this at least twice, where it's like, he's the one that comes up with the whole, "Oh, they're going to try and use the signals thing." And then he tries to get rid of the phone, and he's like, "Dude, go find your phone." They probably won't do that.
And then when he's finally okay with it, he's like, "Okay, call it." And Rogan's like, "I smashed my phone."
Yeah, I love it. That's the kind of stuff where I love it when you can't, because the thing I talk about with Apatow movies is it's way too, a lot of time it's way too obvious what's improv and what isn't. Mm-hmm. And the thing is it's either such smooth improv or such brilliant writing. I love when you can't tell for sure. Mm-hmm. Because that plays out so perfectly, like a conversation where it's like, "Dude, call my phone. We just smashed it." It's such a perfectly put together thing. And then talking about those Franco deliveries, the scene I was going to bring up is also in the woods. Mm-hmm. And it's where there's a running joke where Saul thinks he's a lot more clever than he actually is. Mm-hmm. And Franco's deliveries sell this joke completely because it's so sincere. His whole performance is so sincere. Mm-hmm. And I love the moment when, once again, Saul thinks he's more clever than he is. He thinks there's so many things going on in his mind, while at the same time, nothing going on in his mind. And there's the moment when they're sitting in the car, and Rogan goes to turn it on, and it doesn't start. He's like, "The battery's dead." And Saul, thinking he's clever, "What do you mean the battery's dead?" It's like, how can I put that? "Yeah, but what do you mean the battery's dead?" And then he can just throw out a really funny line nonchalantly, like, oh man, you left talk radio on. The car probably committed suicide. Oh. It's like there's so many different ways his lines are funny and the way they're delivered. It's comedic art. This character. That's what.
And I think in lesser hands, it's a character that also could have run its course, but Franco made sure that he didn't.
Yeah, I think that's the case where Rogan is certainly a very funny actor.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big comedic talent, especially writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just can't imagine Saul going this way with Rogan playing him. I just can't see it at all. Franco is the perfect choice to play a character that thinks he's smart.
Yeah. And be able to keep it consistently funny while we spend the whole movie with him.
Yeah, it's not. I want to change my wording there. It's not that Saul thinks he's smart. It's that Saul thinks he's sly.
That's a pretty good description.
And now there's something. Do you have anything else to add?
There's so much. You could do a whole video on just Saul. I mean, there's the car chase when he thinks to kick out the window and his foot just goes through it, and that's it.
God. That's part of what I was going to transition into. That, oh my God, that has to be one of the funniest images of that decade. Because that's the thing, is we were talking about how they make everything funny. There is the comedy, there's Rogan witnessing a murder, there's their friendship and their subsequent breakup of their friendship, there's the Amber Heard scenes. They make everything funny, even if it looks like it's going in a cliche territory.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only one big thing left here they had to pull off, and they did it in the best way possible. They had to make the action funny.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we dive in, let's remember that this car chase didn't need to happen in the course of the story.
Oh, that's the great thing too, is that usually it's something like when the main characters look like they're about to get out of a bind, it'll be something really convoluted that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing is it's not convoluted because, number one, we've already set up, this is absolutely the kind of bullshit Saul would do, thinking he's being smart.
Sly. Remember Sly.
And secondly, the fact that it escalates to the level that it escalates plays a whole different part in this. Like the fact that the foot through the windshield is one of the funniest images I saw that decade. And that's just a fraction of this cartoon.
What's funny is I just watched Knives Out recently. And when Detective Elliott comes out and says that's one of the dumbest car chases of all time, in my head, I was like, he obviously hasn't seen Pineapple Express. But it's not dumb. It's not dumb as in, oh, that was a really stupid. It's dumb in the way you want it to be.
Yeah, there's a top three here. There's the Knives Out car chase, there's the Pineapple Express car chase, and there's the golf cart car chase in Undercover Brother. Oh my God. And then, talking about making the action funny, there's the Danny McBride fight.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another one of those cases where normally the longer it goes, the more dragged out and unfunny it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie is so well done, the fight gets funnier the longer it goes. You know what the fight reminds me a lot of? Is the fight with John Goodman and William Forsythe in the trailer in Racing Arizona. I feel like it had to be a big influence on this Danny McBride fight. And I love how he's throwing things at Dale, like heavy things at Dale. And when he goes to fight Saul, the first thing he does is he slaps it. And then this, and I'm not Danny McBride's biggest fan. Like his shtick isn't really my thing, but I love him in this. The fact that maybe it's because the whole movie is his character getting progressively more fucked up.
To the point where at the end you think he's died.
Like there's no, like, that's the joke. I've always been under the impression there's no way he made it to the hospital.
No, because after everything's done, you think, oh, they're going to take Danny McBride to the hospital. Next scene, they're in a diner eating breakfast. He just sort of quietly goes out for a second. And the thing is we're not even acknowledging, this is so dark. Like, this is disturbingly dark, which, like, as that registers, it just becomes funnier. Yeah.
And there's, what else was I going to mention? There is the whole thing where it's, once this comes into play, they start to think that Dale has been hired by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they kind of go into it's pretty much becomes Dumb and Dumber with the
Yeah.
But it's still, but only like just in that, like they don't play on that. Like they could have very easily just become Dumb and Dumber once that became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they address it so little that it doesn't feel like they're copying anything.
Nah.
Which is great. There's that's the great thing about this movie is there's so many things that it avoids that it could have fallen into.
Mm-hmm.
But it just shows how smart the movie is and how smart the writing is that they avoided so many things.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of one trap the movie completely falls into.
Yeah, doesn't come to mind for me because we even have the big shootout at the end, and even that is comedic. Because we pay off a joke that we don't realize is a joke. Really, it's just offhand comments that Kevin Corrigan makes, and Kevin Corrigan leaves the gunfight because he's like, "I'm gonna go home and have dinner with my wife," and he leaves.
He gets shot. He doesn't make it.
Well, he goes to leave.
I also love the pre-gunfight. Once again, something that could have been a cliche that's funny for one joke that I think is probably the most underrated joke in the movie. Because it's so simple, but it kills me every time. Like it's uncontrollable, the reaction I have to this. It's when they're suiting up to go into the gunfight, he and Danny McBride.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they are prepping themselves and going and preparing for the worst case scenario is they're practicing drawing their guns and just saying, "Don't." I don't know why that's one of my favorite jokes in the movie. Just the fact that them repeatedly going, "Don't."
I also like when they're in the bunker and they decide they're going to fight back to get out. And they're coughing, and Craig Robinson's just like, "I know what you're doing. I heard the whole thing." And then he recites what the plan was.
And then recognizable faces start popping up, like Ken Jeong and Bobby Lee are part of it.
Yeah.
Ken Jeong's the one that blows up Gary Cole.
Yeah.
It's like they could have just not shown up, and this gunfight would have happened.
Yeah. And that's what's funny is like you don't even get like Franco or Rogan taking him out. It's just Ken Jeong does it.
Yeah. Is this another one of those cases where you could literally take them out of the movie and it would have been the same movie? The same outcome, at least for Gary Cole.
Probably.
Because the whole thing was he shot the dude's brother, and that's the murder that Rogan witnessed. And then the whole thing is retaliation for that. them trying to kill Rogan for witnessing it is its own unrelated thing.
Gary Cole, other than giving an order to do it, Gary Cole doesn't even attend to it personally. He just checks in on progress every now and then. Gary Cole and Seth Rogen don't meet till the very end.
And then they even have their own fight scene, and you're like, is this warranted? And then before you can even question, is this warranted, Ken Jeong's the one that blows him off. Oh my god.
It's like if Rogan had been caught in the situation but didn't witness the murder, he would have no idea who he was fighting. They don't know because they start fighting Ken Jeong's people like it's a free-for-all at one point.
God, how brilliant is this movie?
And I love how you forgot one thing when you were talking about the psyching up scene. Let's not forget we did all this psyching up. We dedicated a montage to it for Danny McBride to just take off. Like they get there and Rogan's out ready to go. Danny McBride's just like, yeah, I can't do this. He just gets in the car and he's like, good luck, and drives off.
And what's great about that is you would think it would soften the impact of that joke that he actually does come back.
Mm-hmm.
But number one, that he comes back in such a triumphant way that he kills Craig Robinson in the process.
With Craig Robinson delivering a hilarious scream as it happens.
And secondly, it gives us all the moments of him like almost dying at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like once he comes back, it's funny enough in itself that it doesn't take away from how funny it is that he initially leaves.
Well, I think there's a third layer to it too. I think the way that we've set up his character, it's totally believable if he would have left and not come back.
Yeah, because of the scene when he says he's not going to rat them out and they're his new friends, and then he just rats them out.
Yeah, like it's like you kind of think, okay, he's going to come back, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, what about this character leads me to believe that he actually will come back?
And then, speaking of him, as if the movie wasn't brilliant enough, as if the movie wasn't already hitting all the right notes, making all the right choices, doing all the right things, it makes one final meta choice that is the most perfect way this movie would have ended. When you go to a movie, usually that has Judd Apatow's name on it and has these cast members in it,
Mm-hmm.
what will people do when the movie is over? They will go somewhere else. They will talk about all the scenes. Not even talk about the scenes. Just mention the scenes. Just literally mention what they just saw.
Mm-hmm.
And quote lines from it. So what are our three main characters doing when they go to the diner at the end? They are doing that for the audience. They are literally just replaying the movie over again by just naming scenes that happen. Like, hey, remember when that happened? Knowing the audience will do that when they leave.
Yeah.
There could not have been a more perfect joke to end on. Except for the fact that they put their hands in the middle and we think he's died for a second. Just when, like I said, even though he does end up being alive, just the way his hand drops is so dark.
And then they go to wake him up, and you think, oh, he died right there at the table. And he does wake up, and he's just like, I'm sorry, I went out for a second.
And that's the thing that's so twisted about this is that David Gordon Green is responsible for this. The director of George Washington and Snow Angels, which has some of the most depressing movie deaths ever in it. There's kind of a spoiler. This is pretty much a spoiler, but I don't know if David Gordon Green's different audiences cross over or not. But George Washington,
Mm-hmm.
said it's about a movie about just following, kids around.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the hell nowhere in this movie, the main kid we've been following, the kid that's on the poster, suffers an accidental head injury and just dies in front of his friends.
Huh.
And they just kind of hide his body so the adults don't find out.
Mm-hmm.
That guy directed Pineapple Express with jokes like this, and that's not even to go into what happens in Snow Angels.
Mm-hmm.
But so the way this movie deals with death in this darkly hilarious way, knowing the director that it comes from, because obviously Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg wrote it. But I mean, to have the director of those very dark, depressing movies handling the deaths in this movie is so mind blowing. Like I said, this guy would go on to make a slasher movie, a Halloween movie.
That he wrote with his character that he teased dying.
That worked on a movie like George Washington with him. It's such a weird career, yet so commendable because of that. It's crazy. So, yeah, is there any... Okay, this is the question that I put on you. Is there anything in this movie that doesn't work?
No. I can't think of anything.
I can't think of anything offhand. Not even a little bit where it's like, oh, they kind of fell into that trap a little bit. No, every time they fall into a trap, they fix it with humor. They do it on purpose so that they can do something humorous with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of a moment that falters. So there is, depending on which version you watch, the unrated version may have some stuff that drags out some stuff a little too long, but like the theatrical version is the one I remember.
I watched, to prepare for this video, I watched the theatrical version of both.
So, yeah, I feel like I have a memory of them finding Bill Hader's skeleton. Am I like having a false memory, or is that like maybe an extended scene somewhere?
It might be an extended scene. Because remember, the scene, that first scene ends with James Remar telling them to put Bill Hader somewhere where nobody will find him.
Yeah, I have a memory of a scene where they find Bill Hader's skeleton. It must be the unrated version.
It must be.
That, or I'm just having the weirdest false memory right now.
There's a name for that. I don't know what it's called. I think it's the Mandela effect. At least what it's called.
So,
where like you have a false memory of something that happened. Like apparently it's really big with movie lines. Like that's where a lot of movie line misquoting comes from. Is people are convinced that it's this one certain way, and then you go back and watch, and it's like I don't remember being delivered that way at all.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've come to the conclusion that apparently Pineapple Express is flawless, but which is a conclusion I don't typically come to doing these videos. There's usually one problem.
Especially with comedies. Because there's going to be something that just doesn't work.
All right. So, should we go on to Grandma's Boy?
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's a movie. We were talking about how I had no idea what it was when it came out. Our friend group, everybody in our friend group had seen it. Like there was a time where as soon as it came out, we went to Owen's place, and me and you hadn't seen it yet. But everybody there was talking about it and quoting it. And I had seen maybe one ad for it, and I didn't know at all what it was. Or that even Sandler's crew starred in it and was a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went in, I did not realize that there was a movie that existed that Alan Covert was the star of.
Mm-hmm.
which was very interesting. Because obviously, since we grew up on Sandler's movies, we were already aware of all of these guys as the supporting players in his movies before they had like the starring parts in this.
Yeah, and I think the supporting role that put Alan Covert on the map was probably The Wedding Singer.
Yeah, because it was a long time before I even realized he was the homeless caddy in Happy Gilmore.
Yeah,
that beard hit him really well. So, where do we start with Grandma's Boy? because what I was going to say about the cult following was what was interesting was I felt like it barely came out.
Mm-hmm.
Barely had any advertising, barely had any time at the like. If you didn't work at the theater at that time, I don't think we would have seen it. It would have come and gone too quickly.
I think it was there a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, but then sure enough, not long after it came out, I ran into a couple of friends that I hadn't seen since like junior high,
Mm-hmm.
and they had seen it, and we
Mm-hmm.
and it was weird. It felt like a club of the small amount of people that knew the Grandma's Boy existed.
Mm-hmm.
But the fans are definitely still out there. I still hear plenty of references to it and plenty of quotes from it.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I can't tell you how many times I still hear she'll massage your cock for money.
yeah, that was Owen's line of choice.
Yeah.
And there was one particular person that was in our lives had a little something to do with that Pineapple Express thing I was talking about. And I feel like long after this movie came out, half of that person's entire vocabulary in their real life was Nick Swartzen's lines from this movie. And so, yeah. So where do we even start with this? Do we?
I mean, there's all kinds of funny people doing funny shit in this movie. I mean, you've got the of all people, the she'll massage your cock for money line comes from Kevin Nash.
Yeah. And then it's because Kevin Nash's presence here is so like almost jarring because his only connection by that point had been the Longest Yard.
Yeah.
And this was kind of because he hadn't really been showing up in that, like he had the Punisher.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, later he'd show up in, like, the Magic Mike movies and John Wick. But it was still kind of like, this was still at a point where it felt really random for him to show up in movies.
Let alone be a guy that was hired by a landlord played by Rob Schneider.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to was Kevin Nash's presence is so like, oh, that's random, that when Rob Schneider shows up himself, it's almost an afterthought.
Yeah.
And then you have, like we were talking about before, we had to do the beginning of this video twice
Mm-hmm.
because Zoom messed up, and we kind of started going into ground so we had to start over. I can't remember what we've already said or not in this video.
But you've got Jonathan Laughlin in the beginning. He's the roommate that's getting kicked out.
And then there's Nick Swartzen. Did we already go into this video that I feel like this is the first time I saw Nick Swartzen prior to like his one stand-up special? I think that made it into the video.
Yeah, that was the other one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then he's one of the writers, if I remember correctly. It's him, Alan Covert, and then another writer. I
believe so, yeah.
And then there is like one continuous joke with this character. And it's once again, it's one of those cases of how long can a running joke go?
Mm-hmm.
Because this movie is an array of running. There are so many full characters in this movie that are just running jokes.
Yeah.
Like Swartzen has the whole, he's living the life of a child.
Yeah. And his parents are his roommates.
Yeah, and it's like, just when you think that joke is worn out, they're just, I like the fact that it doesn't get more over the, like, usually jokes like get more over the top as they go.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that this one settles down more. Like, it starts off at a peak where he's got a race car bed. It's clear that he lives with his parents.
I mean,
and all
we're talking about the kind of movie that one of the most quoted lines is just simply, yeah, but it's a fucking sweet race car bed. Like, that became quotable.
And then there's stuff like when his mom picks him up from work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know why, but my favorite part of that is just that, because you can barely hear it. As they're driving away, when he's already off screen, you can hear him say, "Did you remember the TiVo Samurai Jack?" And then there's just the little moments, like when he's unpacking his lunch at work, and he's like, yes, fruit cup, awesome, Mom. It's like, okay, his mom packs his lunch too, and it's just a little thing in there. It's like the running joke continues, just little details.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have the other side of that. Another character that was quoted a lot, and I get it. I get that what I'm about to criticize it for is the joke. Do you feel like JP as a whole holds up as a character?
I like some of the cracks they make at him, though.
Yeah, like I get that the whole point is that he's the butt of the joke.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, still, it's I don't know, because there's the whole thing where he says he does it because he's nervous, but are we under the impression he legit has split personality? Or is
I'm not sure. I just love when we first see him interact with all of them, and the very first thing, I think it's Alan Covert that says, "So how much are clothes in the Matrix?"
Yeah, there's something that I'm about to bring up, and I'm ashamed of it. I'm absolutely ashamed of it, but that's how I feel about the Matrix joke.
Okay.
Anybody that's been on this channel knows how I feel about Deadpool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a giant fan. And I think the humor's really lazy and just reference heavy for the sake of it. And I know that's the character, but it's
just not for you.
And I cannot stand the sight or sound of TJ Miller. Can't stand him.
Mm-hmm.
And really, he's a terrible person too, so it helps me hate him. But there is a line he has in Deadpool that is such a better version of the Matrix line in this.
Okay.
It's when the guys come in, the henchmen come in, and they're wearing like the leather long jackets, and they've got the sunglasses on. And as they're leaving, TJ Miller says, "Have fun at the midnight show of Blade 2."
Mm-hmm.
And that's funny because he makes it specific enough that it's the midnight show of Blade. He doesn't say, "You look like you're in Blade 2," or whatever. He says, "You look like you're going to the midnight show of Blade 2."
Mm-hmm.
The reason that works so well is that specificity and the sort of like elaborate nature of it. The Matrix line in Grandma's Boy, I remember it being hilarious when we saw the movie and when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Kubert's delivery of it, the fuck you delivery of it. But the fact that as soon as JP walks in, we immediately make the connection. He looks like he's trying to be fucking Neo or something.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of it being like a joke like the TJ Miller line in Deadpool, where it's like, oh, I'm just thinking of that as you say it, and that's why it's funny. Like, now that you say that, I can see that's what it looks like. It looks like they're going to the midnight show of Blade 2.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we've already established he looks like he's trying to be Neo when he walks in, Alan Covert's saying, I'm talking about the clothes in the Matrix, just feels like he's saying, hey, guys, that's the joke. See what I mean?
Okay, let me throw another one out. How do you feel about the joke when I think it's Alan Covert's coming out of Linda Cardellini's office and he's up against the wall and Alan Covert's talking to him while he's making noises, and when Alan Covert leaves, his response is just, how did he see me?
That's very funny. That one works. And then it's I think the main thing though is that the joke is that he's weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it ceases to be he's the butt of the joke when it's just like after a while the scenes he's in just are weird, especially when we get scenes with him by himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the scenes by himself don't work because you have to have the person there to acknowledge it. I talked about this with the chip thing in Talladega Nights, where sometimes this works and sometimes it draws too much attention to the joke. But when it's a joke like this where you need that other part to be the balance,
mm-hmm.
the scenes where he's by himself just come off weird. Like, there's not even really anything funny there anymore because the joke of the character has already been established. It's not like the Nick Swartzen joke where we get a new detail every time where it's like he has a race car bed, his mom picks him up, she packs his lunch.
Let's not forget that when we first meet him, he's wearing kids' pajamas.
Yeah. And just in general, he's so good at playing childlike. He looks youthful.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I heard he had like an alcohol problem or something. He's looking pretty weary these days.
Mm-hmm.
But for this role, when he was getting started, like he literally almost looks like a child.
But we've got all kinds of other comedians hanging out here. We've got Jonah Hill's just hiding out, and pretty much Jonah Hill's essentially an extra.
Yeah. Yeah, because this would have been.
Well, no, he gets that whole thing at the party where he spends an entire party sucking on a woman's tit.
Even that's pretty much in the background.
Yeah. What else? We got Kevin Nealon as the boss, doing Kevin Nealon things.
He's literally like, I honestly, if we didn't get his character's name, I would absolutely assume this is where Gary Potter ended up from Happy Gilmore. Because he's literally saying like the same things. Like the only thing he doesn't say is harness energy, block bad. That's the only thing missing from his dialogue.
Yeah. And then we talked about one drug dealer when we talked about Pineapple Express. Let's talk about another one.
Let's talk about the soul of this movie. Because interestingly enough, their characters are pretty, like, they're just the stoner drug dealer. Their characters are more comparable than I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another case where, like Franco in Pineapple Express, is there a false note in Dante's performance? Like, there's a reason the character is named after it.
Yeah. And I love how every scene with him, we have escalated to something new.
Yeah, this is what the JP thing is missing. This is the escalation we need. Literally, as you said, every new scene has escalated. And we're talking about escalation. His very first second of screen time is answering the door naked. And it will only escalate from there.
Yeah. We talk about owning a tiger or a lion. The lion didn't work out, so now we have a monkey. The monkey has learned Kung Fu from someone actual Chinese. And I think, like with Franco, I think Peter Dante's delivery is everything.
Yes, because you have the big lines like, I looked up in the tree and there's the fucking king of the jungle. But then you've got to counter that. You've got the very small lines that just kill me. Just absolutely kill me. And I don't even know. They're so simple. I don't even know if they're supposed to be this funny. They're probably supposed to be funny, but not near as funny as I find them. Tell me why I think it's so funny when he says, where is the monkey anyway? Oh, he's upstairs putting his nunchucks away.
He says it so matter-of-factly.
I don't know if it's supposed to be as funny as I find it, but it's amazing when that happens. Mm-hmm. When there's a line you can tell it's supposed to be like an offhand ha, but it's some of the funniest shit in there, and it's stuff when it's already surrounded by really funny shit. Oh, there's a line I forgot that I do like about the JP says. Mm-hmm. It's when he's crying at Doris Roberts' house. Mm-hmm. And he says something to his middle name. It's about keeping the secret. And then he starts to cry again. He's like, actually, it's not. It's Philip. And then that makes him cry again. Mm-hmm. That his name's Philip makes him cry. By the way, before we go on, what do you think of that scene?
What do you mean?
Because JP didn't know about the game. So was he always there with ulterior motives, or was that an actual human moment that turned into an ulterior motive?
You know, I don't know.
I feel like that's something that may have been a slip up in writing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just something that's the case where I feel like if you want to compare, I feel like that's something that would have been better handled in Pineapple Express, where in Pineapple Express you don't have to ask questions about what a character's motive is.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what crazy shit happens, we're like, makes sense for that character. So I feel like JP is kind of all over the place here, so that may be why he doesn't quite. And that's nothing against Joel David Moore. Joel David Moore commits.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do nothing but commend him. It's the character where it's like I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Peter Dante's delivery when he answers the phone and he hands it to Alan Covert? His immediate response is, "I think it's the devil."
That's another one of those nonchalant lines, and it's got a great payoff. Like 10 seconds later, I'm way too big to drive to the devil's house. He's able to make setups and payoffs happen like 10 seconds between each other. That's how amazing his deliveries are.
And it's funny because you just get little pieces of it. Like, he's hilarious when they're interviewing him for the news.
Yeah, the news might be my favorite scene with it. And the fact that all these animals go unseen is,
Except the monkey.
yeah, like usually you would call attention to that and think like, oh, the budgetary restraints are obvious, but it's literally funnier that we never see them.
Yeah. Oh man. You got David Spade hiding out at a vegan restaurant as a waiter.
Yeah, I always forget about Monkey
Man. I think one of the flaws of this movie is I think we have a lot of characters that are just supposed to be the butt of the joke. David Spade's one of them. But David Spade's response helps.
Yeah, David Spade is like really, because the thing about David Spade that I really love is that obviously his chemistry with Chris Farley was like no other chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lost Farley, I remember a lot of people thinking like, oh, well, Spade's not really going to be up to the task of remaining a comedic talent without that person to bounce off of.
Mm-hmm.
But Spade has probably, I saw somebody say this in like a comment section, and it's the perfect way to describe him. David Spade's comedy ages so well with the times. Like there's usually comedians that are funny in a certain way, and then as the times go on, their routine may kind of fall to the side and may not be like, it may seem like out of date.
Mm-hmm.
But David Spade can update his bits and his style as the times go on, and it's making him like more and more successful as he goes on later in his career. And that he's able to just come in and do one scene like this and have one character trait to work with. He's still able to make it work. It's like you just kind of say that character, and it's not even that funny. He works at a vegan restaurant. He's the stereotypical vegan, and that's it.
And his name is Shiloh.
Yeah, but when you see Spade play that, you're like, okay, it can work. One joke can work with enough talent, and obviously Spade has got that as far as the eye can see. You may not be able to tell when he's in stuff like Grown Ups, but when you see him just doing interviews or on his own show or just riffing or telling, he is an amazing comedic storyteller. And it's I'm devoting all this time to praising David Spade. He's in the movie for 30 seconds. But yes, we haven't even talked about the older co-stars yet.
No.
We have Doris Roberts, Shirley Jones, and Shirley Knight. If I remember correctly, Shirley Jones is the only one remaining, isn't she?
I'm not sure.
because I think we just lost Shirley Knight a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was a really big deal because Shirley Jones is known for stuff like Carousel, I think, and stuff like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was really out there. Like Shirley Jones being in this movie was the equivalent of people watching Full House and then seeing Bob Saget stand up. Like it was that much of a what the hell
Yeah,
out of nowhere sort of thing.
because Doris Roberts had like Everybody Loves Raymond, Christmas Vacation. Doris Roberts fit right in.
Yeah, and she's not particularly like raunchy.
No.
I mean, she gets stoned as fuck, but she doesn't get raunchy.
No, it's funny because she, like, it's funny how she plays into this story because she doesn't get stoned, but she's okay with everything that happens. Like, you would think at some point in a movie like this, like him and his grandma would have a falling out. That never happens.
Yeah.
Not once.
No, what's weird is, not necessarily weird, but what's a really great writing choice is their relationship gets stronger as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the arc is.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just a little random thing to throw out there. I don't know if the crowd of grandmas boy cares about this, but it's something I always noticed and I always found interesting.
Hmm.
Shirley Jones, who, for the uninitiated, is the one that bangs Nick Swartzen.
Mm-hmm.
And Shirley Knight is the one that's like oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
Shirley Jones won an Oscar for Elmer Gantry, the movie that Burt Lancaster also won for.
Yeah.
She won the Oscar for supporting actress. And Shirley Knight was also nominated that year, and she beat her.
Hmm.
It's like it's weird to see them together in this of all things. And then there is, I do like the way Doris Roberts is like immediately playful with him. Like the relationship between them is immediately established. I love going back to Happy Gilmore.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Sandler's all about prank playing grandmothers.
Yeah.
Because you've got the kiss thing in Happy Gilmore, and then you've got the Sophie thing in this. The first night he's there,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that joke for a number of reasons. I love the setup because it shows like when he says like, "Oh, Sophie didn't die in the bed, did she?" And Doris Roberts' delivery of, "Oh no, she fell on the floor and died right here." And then I love the joke of her pretending to be Sophie's vengeful ghost. Because for starters, it's a very relatable response that Alan Covert comes to the conclusion that there is a vengeful ghost, and his response is, "You have got to be shitting me." And then the fact that it's revealed that it's just her playing a prank. The funny thing about it just being that prank is that it's genuinely creepy before it's revealed that it's a prank.
And then in a true like grandmotherly way, after she scares him and he starts cussing, she just leaves the room saying, "Don't curse, you're better than that." And I think his immediate response after she leaves is just, "Fuck."
And then I also like that it was able to, because with this kind of setup, it seems like all the jokes would be really obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh, the guy's so not in line with his grandparents, and it's like, oh, he's way too old to be doing this thing. He's way too old to have chores, and oh, it's old people doing wacky things that old people don't do. That could have been what the movie was entirely. Not that it's not that, it's a little bit. But the fact that they were able to take that stuff and make something funny out of it, and also not using too much of the stoner humor. Like the whole idea of just, oh, getting stoned is funny.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't leave it at that. They elaborate on the stoner humor by having him do stuff like put all the shit in the oven.
Yeah.
It's like the fact they're able to build off the stoner humor into jokes like that.
I think what separates these two movies from How High and Half Baked is all four of these movies are stoner humor. But for Grandma's Boy and Pineapple Express, you don't have to be a stoner to appreciate the humor.
Yeah. there might be like
how
some
high
sort
and
of
half baked, I think it helps the humor if you're a stoner.
yeah, because they're still like, because the thing is like stoners will watch this and surely find stuff to relate to. Like I'm surely not being a stoner. I'm guessing the oven thing is probably relatable in a certain way. Or the way he's digging through the refrigerator and saying like, I don't know what you are, but I'm going to eat you anyway.
Yeah.
But you do also have like relatable jokes. Like, I'm not much of a gamer at all. In fact, I nearly hate video games.
Mm-hmm.
But every now and then, you'll have me play something.
Mm-hmm.
In the scene where he's trying to show Doris Roberts the controls, and he's just naming this does this, and this does this, and this does this, and this does this, and she's just like, that is so relatable to me when you're telling me the controls.
She gets overwhelmed, and you think he's told her too much, and all she wants to know is, how do I make him walk?
And then
and as somebody that plays a lot of video games and shows other people, it's very relatable that you get caught up in explaining all the functions and forget the most basic one. Like, I'm pretty sure we played a wrestling game before. We played for like 10 minutes, and you were beating somebody up, and then after 10 minutes playing, you looked at me and you were like, so how do I pin him?
And sometimes this stuff can just, like I said, lead to very small lines that are really funny. Like, the whole oven thing has a number of payoffs. Like, number one, it's funny that he's digging through the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's funny that he's like, oh, she's fucking 100. She doesn't have a microwave. And he sticks all these random things into the oven.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a banana on there?
Actually, there's a banana on there when it goes in, and when he pulls it out, the banana's gone. I noticed that when I watched it. So I wonder if that was either a continuity error or if he came to his senses and was like, oh, I can't oven a banana.
But then the thing is then the
like
payoff.
Like you said earlier, I shouldn't have to ask that.
But then the funny thing is, like, and then the payoff is he just goes to grab the tray and burns himself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that should be the final payoff. But then there's one more, like, the joke is still going all the way from him digging in the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
To one final payoff of him just showing up and just throwing his hands up and showing the bandages. And there's just something so funny about that final nonchalant line of Nick Swartzen just saying, what happened? Was your deck on fire? It's like all these funny things happening in this big slapstick moment of him throwing the tray up. You wouldn't think the final payoff is just Nick Swartzen saying, hey, was your dick on fire? It's like the way they can have multiple payoffs like that shows how it takes the stoner concept but is willing to make more jokes out of it. Mm-hmm. Rather than just saying, hey, he's high, isn't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, the shit that he does after he is high is where the punchlines are, and the different things they do with that are where the jokes are.
Yeah.
And it's weird that so many stoner movies have not apparently come to that conclusion yet. They stop at, he's high, isn't that funny? Yeah. And then you, another side character you forgot to mention was Kane.
Yeah.
Where once again, the thought of death and suicide is made to be. That's a joke that I kind of thought would be like, is that even still funny? But like, it is funny because we only really get it twice from him, and it's so like 0 to 100. But like we were saying, though, there is some stuff that shows that it's a time of when it came out, like the DDR fad, the Dance Dance Revolution fad.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when that was a big deal, and it was a big deal that it was in this movie because it was a big deal at the time.
I do love Swartzen's moves on it, though.
Yeah, and it looks like he's barely actually hitting them when we get the full shots. It's only the close-ups that he's clearly hitting the marks.
Yeah.
Yet he's apparently making no mistakes. And then there is another thing about the stoner humor.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, very simple joke. Just very, very simple joke. but hilarious. And that's sometimes some of the hardest stuff to pull off, is taking the simplest things and making them gut-bustingly hilarious. Once again, it sets up as one thing that's already funny by itself, but then there's the payoff. It's where he leaves work after JP's stolen his game, and so he gets stoned on top of stoned on top of stoned. And we get that shot of him and the monkey playing video games, which is a funny image. Him and the monkey playing video games is funny. And what's the payoff to this?
TV's not even on.
That silent cut to the TV.
You're talking about that scene. I love how Dante ends up going back to work with him, and Kevin Nealon's doing his thing, and Dante's just like, "Where do you get your weed from?" And he's just like, "You, Dante."
And then it dawns on Dante that he remembers him by name, and he didn't even realize that was him at first.
He's like, "Oh shit, Mr. Cheezel."
And even though he doesn't work there, he also calls him Mr. Cheezel.
Which makes me wonder how much of the crazy shit has Kevin Nealon seen at Dante's house? Does he know about Dante's friend from Africa?
They have to have met. Because Dante appeared. I don't think Dante does business outside of his house.
That doesn't seem like it. Just like Saul.
And let's acknowledge, by the way, that Saul has an apartment. Apparently, Dante's doing so well, he's a homeowner and can get lions and elephants.
And he's giving away free cable.
So,
Do we even mention that Linda Cardellini's in this movie?
We did before the video fucked up. Because I said, we're kind of bringing freaks and geeks back together, putting this pineapple grass. And yes, she's also very charming. We'll see.
I just think of the scene where her and JP go into the room, and she's overheard them call Alan Covert Graybush, and he's like, "At least I have one." The first thing she says to Alan Covert when she walks in, "Congratulations on having a bush."
Just there, and maybe because Joel David Moore's involved, this is my subconscious because it's in both movies, but does the relationship between Alan Covert, Linda Cardellini, and JP seem a lot like the relationship between Vince Vaughn, Christine Taylor, and White Goodman?
Yeah, I think there's some similarities there.
Especially since when she first comes in, it's the main character who's usually a slacker saying, "Oh, now we got to get down to business," and it's literally the exact same dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we do actually have like a genuinely charming sort of way to where they actually end up becoming a couple. Like, it doesn't feel too contrived, because there's the moment when like they kind of loosen up around each other, and then they have the moment with his grandma that she witnesses, and it's like once they have that moment with his grandma, because usually the thing is when you have like, you know, the hot female lead, the question is always, how do they end up falling with the slacker? Falling in love with the slacker, how does that happen? But in this scene where they're at the party, and then the aftermath when they're just hanging out with his grandma, and she sees the relationship between the two of them, it becomes really believable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that he comes off like a slacker, but he's actually doing this thing with the game that he's been active on for like years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's set up to be a slacker when really he's not.
I love how, like, the movie could have easily, one of the jokes could have been he lives with grandma, but they actually make Doris Roberts purposeful.
Yeah.
She helps drive the plot by not just giving him a place to stay. But and I love how even when she's stoned, she's still grandmotherly. Do you remember the scene where she offers ice cream sandwiches?
Yeah, that's unpleasant. She was when she passed out. She was in the middle of making something.
Yeah. Uh,
So, is that I think the only thing I made note of that I forgot to mention was another David Spade line.
hmm.
I don't know why I find it so funny when he gets pissed off and he's trying to insult everybody, and he insults Nick Swartzen by calling him a red-shirted ass.
Oh man.
So yes, I believe red-shirted ass is the last thing I can think of to
So I
mention.
think it's safe to
I do
I
think
think
it's
it's safe
funny.
to say Pineapple Express is the better movie, but Grandma's Boy does have some jokes that really work.
Yeah, and we talked about what was it? We talked about Talladega Nights in basketball, where it was like Talladega Nights was objectively better, but and constantly funny, but maybe baseball made us laugh harder.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're about Pineapple Express could be seen as I know technically nothing's objective, but for the sake of argument, we'll say Pineapple Express is an objectively better movie,
Mm-hmm.
given the writing and the way it's put together and the direction and all that. But as far as which one makes me laugh harder, I don't know that I can say for sure.
Yeah.
Because usually the more well put together movie is so focused on all of its aspects that the ones that's mainstream is just being funny without necessarily dealing too much with plot or structure or whatever, or character or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's able to focus so much on its comedy, it can get bigger laughs out of you because
Yeah.
that's its main focus.
Pineapple Express too. Pineapple Express feels like a more complete movie, whereas Grandma's Boy almost feels like a series of skits.
Yeah, because we were talking about how the climax of Pineapple Express is so many things coming together.
Mm-hmm.
The climax of Grandma's Boy is, well, and that's what you were saying is it's the grandma character is actually purposeful because she actually serves the plot as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we'll bring her in, and the fact that she can play the game shows that it's his game.
Yeah.
Because his initial theory was, oh, he maybe just gotten a copy and learned overnight or something, which is a pretty lame excuse. I don't know how Mr. Cheezel was going to let that fly, but or just go on that.
Because Mr.
But
Cheezel doesn't really allow negativity in his life.
yeah,
He
but
even drops the line at the end once JP's been defeated. It's almost like the Nick Swartzen character because he's like, I'll call your mom to come pick you up.
because you'll notice JP never confesses.
Mm-hmm.
Doris Roberts just wins the game, and Mr. Cheezel immediately says, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you. It's like, all right, I guess we're done.
It's funny. The climax to the movie is a problem that only had occurred about 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't really any conflict in the movie. It was just stuff happening.
Yeah, and I mean,
Because you think it's gonna be about the levels getting done, and then halfway through, Linda Cardellini takes them out because all levels are done, so that conflict's done.
Yeah, and honestly, you can criticize a movie like that for not having a real plot or conflict because that's what you're taught is basic story structure. But I mean, you can make a movie like this work, as this one pretty much does. Like, you don't necessarily need that because a lot of times conflict is just going to feel convoluted, and the fact that it's like, well, why don't we just focus on the laughs?
See, where it also comes in too is we were talking about how you don't have to be a stoner to appreciate the comedy in these two movies. I think Grandma's Boy is more tailored to somebody that you could put the movie on and get stoned, and you don't really have to pay attention. You just look up and funny shit's happening.
Yeah.
You don't really have to follow it like you do Pineapple Express.
Yeah.
Although Pineapple Express is a lot like that too. There's just a linear plot going through it.
Yeah. The only thing about that too is you won't always know where the jokes are because, like you were saying with Grandma's Boy, you can just look up and something funny will be happening, like no doubt.
Yeah.
But Pineapple Express, sometimes you need context.
Yeah.
Like you will just like you could just randomly look up into car chase that we have. But half the laughs about the car chase come from how it started.
Yeah. And the fact that it's totally unnecessary.
So yeah, we really have nothing against Grandma's Boy, but Pineapple Express is just doing so many things right,
Mm-hmm.
and getting the big laughs. Like I was saying, is you can get bigger laughs out of a movie like Grandma's Boy that's only focused on laughs and less about character and story.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Pineapple Express is able to do all those things and get the big laughs is a big deal.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to pull all of that off. So, because I have Grandma's Boy has big laughs in it, but I don't think I laugh at anything as hard in Grandma's Boy as I do at Saul's foot through the windshield.
Or Bill Hader.
Yeah. Oh, and we forgot another one of my favorite lines about that is once he pulls it back in, oh, hey, I can see through my leg hole. Oh. All right, so is that our conclusion?
I think that about does it.
All right, we don't know what the next one is. We had one in mind last week that we almost did before we did this one. I don't know if we're going to do that one or a different one, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And then I'll have two. We're only doing one more of these this week for Friday, it looks like, potentially, depending on things. So in place of when we normally be doing one, I'll be doing a review video. And there should be 2 review videos this week on top of the last 2 Stephen King videos, and then R2 should be what this week is. So,
yeah. And then hopefully after this week, next week we'll go back to Wednesdays and Fridays.
And then the big review video that was supposed to be Saturday has so many movies on it that I got held up. So it's going to be like probably tomorrow or Wednesday. So that is actually tomorrow will probably be the next. Tomorrow will be the next King, and then Wednesday will probably be the big review video. And then we're actually getting to a point where stuff comes out Friday that I can actually look at. So yeah. So if you don't have anything to add, I think that might be it.
I think so.